He had everything money could buy, except peace. And that morning, as he waited for a simple cup of coffee, his past walked right back into his life, carrying a secret that could change everything. What happened in that hotel room would make anyone believe in second chances. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss stories like this one. Stories that can change the way you see love, betrayal, and redemption. And tell me in the comments from which city you're watching this right now. The rain tapped softly against the tall glass windows, the city below moving in slow motion under a gray sky. He sat at the table in silence, eyes fixed on the empty coffee pot. He had called for more 20 minutes ago. Waiting was something he never did well. Not for people, not for business, not for anything. His watch ticked, each second heavier than the last. A knock finally came, soft, almost hesitant. He told him to come in. The door opened, and a figure stepped inside wearing the hotel's uniform, carrying a tray with fresh coffee and the hotel's signature white rose in a small vase. He didn't look up right away, only gestured for the coffee to be placed on the table. But there was a pause, a silence that didn't belong. When he finally looked, his gaze caught hers. For a moment, the world froze. He knew that face, the familiar curve of her lips, the shape of her eyes. Her hands gripped the tray, and the slightest tremor made the porcelain cups rattle. His eyes drifted lower to the rounded swell beneath her apron. The chair scraped against the floor as he stood, his chest tightening, breath catching. She looked like she was searching for words, yet terrified to say them. And then she spoke, her voice low and unsteady. "I didn't know it would be your room." In that instant, years of silence and everything they had buried between them came rushing back. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Inside, only one thought pulsed between them, unspoken but deafening. Was the child hers or his? The silence stretched between them like a rope pulled tight, every second threatening to snap into something neither of them could take back. He felt his pulse thudding in his ears, yet he couldn't tear his eyes away from her. She was standing in the middle of his world again, after all those years, looking both exactly the same and impossibly different. Her hair was darker now, tied up carelessly, as if she had been rushing all morning. Her face carried a softness he remembered, but there was something else too, a tiredness, a shadow that had never been there before. He swallowed hard, but the bitterness that rose in his throat wasn't from the coffee he hadn't yet tasted. It was from the memory of the last time he saw her. She had been walking away from him, back then, the echo of her footsteps swallowed by the night. No words, no goodbye, just gone. She set the tray down slowly, as if trying not to wake something dangerous between them. He wanted to speak, to ask why, to demand answers, but all that came out was her name. It sounded foreign on his tongue, like it didn't belong to him anymore. Her eyes flickered just for a moment, and he saw it, the flash of pain she tried to hide. But then she turned, as though leaving was the only way to survive this moment. "Wait," he said, his voice lower now, almost pleading. She froze, her back still to him. The air smelled faintly of rain and coffee, but beneath that was something else, something that belonged only to her. And suddenly, he wasn't in the hotel anymore. He was back in that small kitchen years ago, watching her stir sugar in her coffee, barefoot on the cold tiles, humming a song he could never quite place. She had laughed when he'd complained about the way she made it too sweet, telling him life was bitter enough already. The memory faded as she turned to face him again. "I have to go," she murmured. The words were polite, but her eyes begged him not to make this harder than it already was. But how could he not? She was here, pregnant, and every instinct in him screamed that he deserved to know. His hand twitched toward the chair, toward the table, toward anything to keep himself from reaching for her. "How far along?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. She hesitated, and in that hesitation, the truth was already spilling into the room. 6 months. The words landed heavy between them. 6 months. Long enough to know, to be sure. Long enough for the math in his head to start racing, clashing with every possibility he didn't want to consider. And then came the question that had been burning a hole in his chest since the moment she walked in. Is it mine? Her breath caught. She looked away, toward the rain-soaked city, as though the answer might be written somewhere out there. When she turned back, there was no anger in her expression, only a strange, aching sadness. Do you really want to know? Her question lingered like smoke in the air, and he realized there was no safe answer. Yes, he wanted to know, but he also feared that knowing would burn through whatever fragile thread still connected them. She didn't wait for him to speak. Instead, her gaze softened, but her shoulders remained tense, as if bracing for impact. You think you know what happened, she said quietly, but you don't. You never did. The words cut deeper than he expected, and before he could ask what she meant, his mind dragged him backward, pulling him into that night, the one he'd replayed 1,000 times in his head. It had been raining then too, heavier than today. The storm rattled the windows of their home, a sprawling mansion that somehow always felt too empty. He had been pacing in the study, phone in hand, reading the same message over and over. An anonymous text sent to him late in the evening. A photo attached, her with another man. The image was blurry, taken from a distance, but the curve of her jaw, the color of her coat, the way her hand rested on his arm, it was all too familiar. The message had only one sentence. You should know who she spent her nights with. He'd waited for her in the living room, every tick of the clock sharpening the blade of his anger. When she finally walked in, cheeks flushed from the cold, carrying a paper bag from the bakery she loved, he couldn't hold it in. He demanded answers, voice raised, shoving the phone toward her. She'd looked at the picture, then at him, her expression unreadable. Where did you get this? It doesn't matter where I got it, he had snapped. Is it true? Her silence had been deafening. She didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't plead. She just set the bag down and walked upstairs. He hadn't followed. He couldn't. His pride had built a wall too high to climb. By morning, she was gone. No note, no call, just gone. Back in the hotel room, he realized his fists were clenched. She was watching him now, reading every twitch in his face. I never told you, she said softly, because you didn't want to hear it. You already decided who I was that night. His chest tightened. So tell me now. She hesitated, glancing toward the door as if someone might be listening. The rain outside grew louder, a steady drumbeat against the windows. And then she said it, the thing that would change everything he thought he knew. I wasn't with him for me. I was with him for you. The words hung in the air, strange and impossible, like a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit. For him, he stared at her, his mind racing to catch up, replaying the image of her in that photograph, standing too close to another man, her hand on his arm. For him, it made no sense. What are you talking about? His voice was low, but sharp, as if afraid to let the anger spill out unchecked. She took a slow breath, her fingers curling over the edge of the tray she'd placed on the table earlier, gripping it like an anchor. Do you remember the night before that picture was taken? You got that call. You thought I was asleep, but I heard everything. The voice on the other end was threatening you, talking about debts, about business deals that had gone wrong. He frowned, shaking his head. That's not possible. I had no debts. Her eyes didn't flinch. Not money. People. Dangerous people. You might think your world was built on clean contracts and boardroom meetings, but it wasn't. That man, the one in the photo, he wasn't my lover. He was someone I had to meet because your life was on the line. A sharp, cold ache settled in his chest. You expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything from you, she said, her voice steady now, almost tired. But that night, he told me things I didn't want to hear. About people watching you, waiting for the perfect moment to make an example out of you. And the only reason I was there was because he said he could make it stop. He wanted something in exchange. His jaw tightened. And what exactly did he want? Her eyes flickered down for the briefest moment, but she forced them back up to meet his. Information. About your next moves. Your investments. I told him I didn't know anything, but he didn't believe me. He kept pushing, saying I was lying to protect you. He said if I didn't give him something, he'd make sure you didn't live to see the end of the week. He stared at her, torn between disbelief and the unsettling realization that there were things in his past, deals, meetings, alliances, that had left shadows he never truly understood. I thought if I met him, If I kept him talking, I could buy you time. I didn't tell you because I knew exactly how you'd react, with pride and anger. You would have gone straight to him, and that would have been the end of you. Her voice broke on the last word, but she caught it before it could turn into tears. He felt the room tilt slightly, the ground shifting under the certainty he had built for years. Why didn't you just tell me the truth later? After you left? Her lips pressed together. Because the next day, he disappeared. Completely. And I thought maybe it was over. But then, I found out I was pregnant. And I knew you wouldn't believe a word of what happened. You'd think I was just trying to cover my tracks. The tension between them grew heavier, almost suffocating. He could hear the rain outside, relentless and steady like the pounding in his chest. 6 months, he murmured, half to himself. 6 months ago. Where were you living? Her expression shifted, a flicker of guilt or hesitation flashing across her face. Nowhere permanent, she admitted. I was moving around a lot. I didn't want to be found. By you, or by them. A cold shiver ran through him. Them. She took a step closer, her voice barely above a whisper. The man in the photo wasn't working alone. And if they find out about this baby... She stopped. Her eyes darted to the door again, and for the first time, he saw genuine fear there. Not for herself, but for something far more fragile. They can't know, she said. You have no idea what they're capable of. And before he could ask more, there was another knock at the door. But this time it was not soft. It was loud, hard, insistent. The pounding at the door was nothing like the gentle knock that had brought her into his room minutes earlier. This was sharp, deliberate, each strike against the wood echoing through the suite with the weight of authority or danger. He froze. She stiffened, her eyes locking with his in a silent plea. Neither of them moved at first. The knock came again, louder this time. 3 beats. A pause. Then 3 more. A rhythm that didn't feel random. He stepped toward the door, but she caught his wrist, her grip surprisingly firm for someone trembling. Don't, she whispered. Who is it? He asked, his voice low. Her hesitation said more than any answer could. She glanced toward the tray she'd brought in, then toward her apron pocket, as if debating something. Finally, she shook her head. You don't want them to see me here. Trust me. The knock turned into a voice, deep, smooth, and strangely polite, but with an edge that made the hair on his arm stand on end. Room service. Follow up. It was a lie. They both knew it. He hadn't ordered anything else, and no one in this hotel used that tone with guests. This wasn't staff. This was someone who wanted in, and wasn't leaving without it. She backed away, putting the dining table between her and the door. Her eyes darted toward the bedroom. Do you still have the balcony? She asked quickly. Yes, he said, confused. If they come in, I'll go that way. But you need to get rid of them. Before he could reply, the voice came again, firmer now. We know you're in there. Let's not make this unpleasant. A spark of anger lit inside him. Whoever this was, they were on his doorstep, in his space, trying to intimidate him. He strode to the door and pulled it open without warning. A man stood there, tall, well-dressed, hair slicked back like he'd stepped out of a corporate meeting. But his eyes were cold, calculating. He smiled faintly, as if he'd just been invited into a game he intended to win. Good morning, the man said smoothly. May I come in? No, he replied flatly. State your business. The man's smile widened. Business? That's a generous way to put it. Let's just say I represent some interested parties. His eyes flicked over the suite, scanning every corner. Then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. We've been looking for someone, and we have reason to believe she's here. Every muscle in his body went rigid. He didn't turn to look at her, but he knew she could hear every word. The man's gaze searched his face, looking for a crack, a reaction. I think you know who I'm talking about, the man continued. She has something that doesn't belong to her, and my employers would very much like it back. His instinct screamed to deny everything, but another part of him, the one that had built empires by reading people, told him this man wasn't bluffing. He already knew. I have no idea what you're talking about, he said evenly. The man chuckled softly. That's fine. You'll remember soon enough. But if you see her, tell her we'll be in touch. And tell her time is running out. With that, he stepped back, straightened his jacket, and walked away down the hall without looking back. The door clicked shut, and silence fell again. He turned slowly toward her. She was pale, her hands gripping the back of the chair, so tightly her knuckles were white. "You know him," he said. She nodded once. "And if he's here, it means they've found me." He moved toward her. "What exactly did you take?" Her eyes locked with his, and for the first time since she'd walked in, she looked almost ashamed. "Something I couldn't leave behind. Something that belonged to you. And if I'd left it, you'd be dead by now." Her words were a loaded gun, and he could feel the bullet inside them before she even pulled the trigger. He studied her, searching for the smallest clue in her face, the twitch of a muscle, the flicker of her gaze. She didn't flinch. She was ready to say it, but not ready for him to hear it. "I'm listening," he said, his voice tight. She took a slow breath and stepped away from the table, putting distance between them as if confessing from too close might shatter something between them. "Do you remember 3 years ago when your company signed that international contract with the energy firm in South Asia?" His brow furrowed. "Of course I do. It was one of the biggest deals we ever closed." She nodded, but her eyes were cold now. "That deal wasn't just about energy. It was about leverage. Your partner in that contract, the one you trusted the most, was laundering money through the subsidiary in Europe. And he was doing it under your name. Without you knowing, he put you directly in the middle of a criminal investigation." He shook his head. "That's impossible. I would have. You would have caught it if you weren't so busy trying to build an empire while ignoring what was happening in your own office," she cut in sharply. "I saw the documents. I saw the transfers. And I saw the piece of paper that tied it all back to you. The one they could use to destroy you, to strip you of everything you had, and maybe even lock you away for the rest of your life." Her voice softened, but the weight of her words only grew heavier. "That's what I took. That paper. The original contract. The proof. If they had kept it, you wouldn't be standing here right now." The world tilted for him in that moment. The memory of late-night meetings, closed doors, whispered conversations in languages he didn't speak. They all came rushing back with a clarity that felt almost violent. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me," she said without hesitation. "You didn't believe me about the photo. Why would you believe me about this? You would have thought I was just trying to cover my own betrayal." "And now?" he asked. "Now," she said, looking toward the door where the stranger had stood minutes earlier. "They know I have it. And they know I'm not alone anymore. Which means," she hesitated, her gaze dropping briefly to her stomach, "the baby is in danger too." Something primal rose in him then. Anger, fear, a protective instinct he didn't fully understand. "You should have come to me the second you knew you were pregnant," he said. Her laugh was humorless. "And watch you throw me out again? Watch you call me a liar to my face? No, I chose to disappear because it was safer for both of us." He stepped closer, his voice lower now, heavier with something unspoken. "And whose child is it?" Her eyes locked with his, unwavering, even as her voice trembled. "Yours." The word hit him like a punch, knocking the air from his lungs. He wanted to demand proof, to challenge her, but deep down, something told him she was telling the truth. He opened his mouth to speak, but before a single sound could escape, a muffled voice came from the hallway outside, followed by the metallic slide of the keycard against the lock. Her eyes widened. "They're not going to knock this time." The soft click of the lock disengaging was louder than any gunshot could have been. It sliced through the room, silencing the sound of the rain, drowning out the rapid beat of his own heart. For a second, neither of them moved, both frozen in that suspended space between choice and consequence. Then she whispered, "Balcony. Now." He didn't argue. He grabbed her hand, warm, tense, trembling, and pulled her toward the bedroom. The sliding glass doors to the balcony were already slightly ajar, letting in the cool, damp air. They stepped out just as the hotel room door swung open. They crouched low, hidden behind the thick curtains that billowed with the wind. From here, they could hear everything inside but remain unseen. 2 sets of footsteps entered. Heavy, deliberate. Men who didn't care about being quiet because they knew they had the power in the room. One voice, the same man from before, spoke first. "Search it. She's here." Her hand tightened around his. He could feel her pulse racing through her fingertips. The second man, deeper voiced and impatient, muttered something about wasting time. Drawers slid open. Chairs scraped. The clink of silverware hitting the floor as the tray was inspected. They were tearing the place apart. The man from before kept talking, his voice too calm for what he was doing. You know what I don't like about people like her? They always think they can run. But the world is small when you know where to look. Every word was laced with certainty, the kind that came from tracking someone for months, maybe years. The man was close to the balcony door now. One wrong movement, one stray sound, and they would be caught. He shifted his weight slightly, but she grabbed his arm, forcing him still. Her eyes said what her voice couldn't. Don't move. The man lingered at the balcony entrance, the curtains swaying just inches from their faces. For a moment, he thought the man might step out, but then a phone rang inside the room. Urgent. Short tones. He heard the man answer. Yeah. A pause. We're in her last known location. Another pause. His tone changed, sharper, focused. What? Are you sure? When? Silence, except for the rain, and then the man swore under his breath. Let's go. Footsteps moved toward the door, quick this time. The lock clicked again, and then they were gone. Only after the sound of their retreating steps faded down the hall did she finally exhale, her breath shaky. He stood, sliding the curtain aside, just enough to look back into the room. Everything was in disarray, cushions tossed, drawers open, his personal things scattered. He turned back to her. We can't stay here. She nodded. I know, but leaving won't be enough. Once they know we were here, they'll track everywhere we go. His mind was already moving ahead, thinking of safe places, contacts he could trust. We need to disappear before they realize they were wrong about your location. She hesitated, and he saw it, that flicker of doubt in her eyes. There's somewhere we can go, she said finally, but you're not going to like it. He frowned. Where? Her voice dropped to a near whisper. Your father's estate. His chest tightened at the mention. That wasn't just a place. It was a history he'd buried. A man he'd vowed never to see again. That's not an option, he said sharply. It's the only option, she countered. It's the one place they won't look. Not because they can't find it, but because they're too afraid to. Something in her tone made his skin prickle. He'd grown up in that house. He thought he knew every secret buried there. But from the way she said it, he realized there were things about his father, and that estate, he'd never been told. And for the first time in years, he wasn't sure he wanted to know them. The decision wasn't made in words. It happened in the way she held his gaze, steady and unyielding, as if daring him to refuse her when they both knew they had no time for pride. He didn't say yes, but 10 minutes later, they were in the service elevator, descending through the guts of the hotel, the metallic groan of the cables carrying them toward a different kind of danger. He'd called in a favor, a car waiting in the underground garage, windows tinted black, engine already running. They climbed in without looking back. As the city streets blurred past, he found himself gripping the armrest, the tension in his body refusing to loosen. She sat beside him, her hands folded over the curve of her stomach, eyes fixed on the rain streaking the glass. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions. About the estate, about why she thought it was safe, about how much of his past she knew. But instead, his mind drifted back to the last time he'd set foot on that property. It had been over a decade ago, the day he swore never to return. The estate wasn't a home. It was a fortress disguised as wealth, a place where secrets were currency and trust was a myth. His father had ruled it like a king, and everyone inside its walls had learned quickly that loyalty was rewarded, but betrayal was punished in ways no one dared to speak about. He glanced at her. You realize there's a reason I stayed away from that place. She didn't look at him. I know, but there's also a reason the men chasing me will never set foot there. Your father's enemies feared him more than they feared the law. And some of those enemies are still alive. He swallowed hard. The way she spoke of his father was unsettling. Not like a wife speaking about her father-in-law, but like someone who knew him in ways he hadn't realized. How exactly do you know so much about him? Her eyes flicked to his for a heartbeat, then away. Because I had to. The car turned off the main road, the noise of the city fading behind them. The pavement gave way to gravel, the steady crunch beneath the tires echoing in the enclosed space. The trees thickened, branches heavy with rain, until they formed a tunnel of green and gray. And then, through the mist, the estate appeared. It rose from a land like it had been there for centuries, a sprawling mansion of stone and glass, surrounded by high walls laced with ivy, the gates forged from black iron that seemed to absorb the light. 2 stone lions flanked the entrance, their faces worn by time, but still fierce, still watching. The driver slowed as they approached the gates. A camera turned toward the car, scanning. A second later, the gates opened without a word exchanged. No guard, no intercom, just a silent acknowledgement. The gravel road curved through perfectly kept gardens, the kind that looked beautiful but hid more than they revealed. Statues stood half-hidden in the foliage, faces eroded into ghostly expressions. He felt the old heaviness settle on his shoulders, the air itself thicker here. When the car stopped in front of the mansion, a man was already waiting at the top of the stone steps. Tall, lean, dressed in black, his face impassive. His father's shadow, in every sense. The man's eyes went first to him and then to her. They lingered on her stomach just a second too long. "You're not expected," the man said. "I'm not here for a family reunion," he replied coldly. "We need a place to stay. Somewhere private." The man's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something, recognition, maybe even warning, in his eyes. "Then you'd better come inside, before someone sees you." As they stepped through the massive front doors, the smell of polished wood and old smoke hit him, and memories rushed back like unwelcome guests. What he didn't notice, what only she seemed to catch, was the way the man at the door locked it behind them and slid the bolt into place. Not with the casualness of habit, but with the finality of a trap closing. The sound of the bolt sliding into place was small, almost forgettable, but it echoed inside him like a warning. He glanced back, half expecting to see a smirk on the doorman's face, some hint that the gesture had meaning. But the man's expression was carved from stone, his eyes already turned away as he disappeared down the hallway without another word. The entrance hall was vast, its marble floors polished to a mirror shine, chandeliers casting a soft golden glow that somehow made the place feel colder, not warmer. The walls were lined with portraits, generations of stern-faced men and women staring down as if judging the trespassers who dared step into their domain. He remembered them all from his childhood, though they seemed different now, sharper, more alive, as though their eyes were tracking his every move. She walked beside him in silence, but her gaze was restless, scanning every detail of the space. Not like someone admiring wealth, but like someone cataloging exits and blind spots. "Where's your father?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I haven't spoken to him in years," he said. "For all I know, he's in one of his overseas properties." Her lips pressed together, the smallest crease appearing between her brows. "Or he's here, watching." He didn't like the way she said that. As a boy, he'd felt his father's presence in this house even when the man wasn't physically there, an invisible hand on his shoulder, a silent weight pressing on him from every corner. It was a house that listened, a house that remembered. They reached the grand staircase, its banister dark wood worn smooth by generations of hands. Before they could ascend, the same man from the door reappeared, carrying 2 glasses of water on a silver tray. "My orders are to take you to the West Wing," he said, his tone flat. "It's quiet there. No staff unless summoned." He handed them the glasses, and for a moment, his eyes locked on hers again. Something flickered there, curiosity, maybe recognition. She didn't drink. The West Wing was a world apart from the main hall. Narrower corridors, dimmer light, the air cooler, smelling faintly of cedar and something older. Doors lined the hallway, some closed, some ajar, revealing glimpses of unused rooms covered in white sheets like corpses in a morgue. Their assigned room was at the very end. It was spacious, with high ceilings and tall windows that looked out over the back gardens. The rain had eased, but the sky was still heavy with clouds, casting everything in muted gray. She set her bag down but didn't sit. Instead, she went straight to the window, peering out with the same tension she'd had since they'd left the hotel. "We're not safe here," she murmured. He sighed. "You said this was the one place they wouldn't come." She turned, her eyes sharp now. "I said they wouldn't come. I didn't say you were safe." He stared at her, trying to decipher the meaning behind her words. But before he could ask, a faint sound drifted in from the hallway. The whisper of footsteps on old wood. Not hurried, not loud, just steady. He opened the door, but the hallway was empty. The air was cooler out there, the shadows longer. When he stepped back inside, she was standing in the center of the room, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, her face pale. "Your father knows we're here," she said. Something in the certainty of her tone made him uneasy. "How do you know?" "Because," she whispered, "this is the same room he locked me in the last time I was here." Her words hit him like a sudden drop in temperature, the kind that steals your breath before you realize why you're shivering. He blinked, staring at her as if the very idea was impossible. "You've been here before?" he asked, his voice low, almost cautious. She nodded once, slow, deliberate. "Yes, and you didn't know, because he made sure you wouldn't." He felt a weight settle in his stomach. When her gaze drifted toward the far wall, where a massive wardrobe stood like a sentry, its dark wood gleaming faintly in the dim light. "The night after I left you." His pulse quickened. "You came here after that?" "Why?" Her voice was steady, but the way her fingers curled slightly at her sides betrayed the tension in her body. "I didn't come here by choice. Your father sent someone for me." He almost laughed, not from disbelief, but from the absurdity of it. "That doesn't make any sense. Why will my father—" "To protect you," she interrupted. "At least, that's what he said." But it didn't feel like protection. She began to move slowly around the room, her eyes never staying in one place for long, as though she was seeing it all again. Not as it was now, but as it had been then. "They brought me here in the middle of the night. No luggage, no explanation. The windows were locked, and the door only opened when someone brought food. And every time they came in, they said the same thing. You'll leave when it's safe." He swallowed hard. Safe from what? She turned to face him, and there was something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Not just fear, but the kind of fear that had calcified into permanent mistrust. From the people who had that contract. From the men who wanted leverage over you. But I started to realize something while I was here. They weren't just keeping me from them. They were keeping me from you. A memory surfaced in his mind, uninvited. Weeks after she had left, his father had insisted he take a sudden trip abroad for business opportunities. It had never occurred to him that it might have been orchestrated to keep him away from somewhere or someone. She stepped closer now, lowering her voice. "Your father knew everything about what happened. The picture, the meeting, the stolen contract. He was already playing his own game, and I was a piece he needed to control." His throat felt dry. "You think my father was involved with them?" "I don't think," she said. "I know. One night, I overheard a conversation outside this room. His voice, talking to someone about money, about ensuring the paper stayed out of the wrong hands. And then he said something that chilled me to the bone. If my son learns the truth, he'll destroy everything I've built." Silence swallowed the room, broken only by the faint creak of the floorboards beneath their feet. He wanted to ask more, press for every detail, but his thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a noise from inside the wardrobe. Faint, almost like a shift in the wood. He stared at it. "Did you hear that?" She didn't move, her body tensing all over again. Another sound followed, the slow, deliberate click of a hidden latch. And then, with a groan that seemed to echo through the walls, the wardrobe door began to open from the inside. The creak of the wardrobe opening was like the sound of a wound tearing open after years of being stitched shut. He instinctively stepped in front of her, one arm slightly extended, his body tense and ready for what exactly? He didn't know. The crack between the doors widened, and a shadow spilled into the room, shifting against the muted light. For a split second, it looked like the darkness itself was moving, until a figure emerged, tall, thin, dressed in a dark suit that seemed to absorb every flicker of light. His face was partially hidden under the brim of a hat, but when he looked up, His eyes glinted with something cold and deliberate. Neither of them spoke at first. The man stepped fully out of the wardrobe, and only then did he close the doors behind him with a careful precision, as though sealing something inside. He didn't hurry, didn't stumble. Every movement was measured, controlled. Finally, he said, "You shouldn't have come here." His voice was low, rough, with an accent that was hard to place, just enough to make you question where he came from, but not enough to give it away. The man's gaze moved to her, lingering just a moment longer than it should have. "It's been a long time." Her voice was steady, but he could hear the strain under it. "Not long enough." The man gave a faint smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Still stubborn. Still willing to burn the whole house down rather than hand over what you took." He stepped closer, ignoring him completely now, as though he wasn't even in the room. "You have something that belongs to very dangerous people, and your little vanishing act might have worked if you hadn't walked straight into the one place we knew you'd eventually come back to." That's when it hit him. "You knew she'd come here," he said, his voice hard. The man finally looked at him, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Of course. Your father knew it too. He made sure of it." The mention of his father was a knife, but he kept his face unreadable. "Where is he?" The man tilted his head. "Closer than you think, and watching every move you make." His stomach nodded, but he didn't let it show. "What do you want?" The man's smile vanished. "The paper. The original contract. You give it to me, and you both walk out of here alive. Keep it, and this place becomes your grave." Her jaw tightened. "If you kill us, you'll never get it." The man studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her words, then shrugged slightly. "You're right, which is why I'm giving you until tomorrow night. If I don't have it by then, you won't see another sunrise." He turned toward the wardrobe again, and before either of them could react, he stepped back inside. The doors shut with the same slow precision, and the latch clicked back into place. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he walked toward the wardrobe, yanking the doors open, but there was nothing inside. Just darkness and the faint smell of cedar. She spoke first, her voice almost a whisper. "That's how it was last time. He comes and goes without anyone noticing. Like the house itself is helping him." He turned back to her. "Then we have less than 24 hours to figure out where that paper is. Because if we don't, we're not leaving here alive." Her hand went to her stomach, and for the first time since she'd walked into his hotel room, he saw her look genuinely afraid. "It's not just our lives, you know. If they get that paper, your father isn't the only one they'll destroy. They'll take everything you have left, including this baby." And just as he opened his mouth to speak, a deep, familiar voice echoed from the doorway, one he hadn't heard in years. "I told you to stay away from her." The voice froze him where he stood. It was deeper than he remembered, slower, each word deliberate, the kind of tone used by men who knew they didn't need to raise their voices to be obeyed. He turned toward the doorway, and there he was. His father stood framed by the dim light of the corridor, dressed impeccably in a dark three-piece suit, as though he'd been expecting an important guest rather than barging into a confrontation. His hair, now streaked with silver, was combed back with precision, his posture perfectly straight. Age hadn't softened him. If anything, it had carved his features into something sharper, harder. "You haven't changed," his father said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. His eyes flicked to her, lingering for a moment before returning to him. "Still thinking with your heart instead of your head. Still letting people like her lead you into trouble." The words were bait, designed to provoke. He refused to bite. "You've been hiding her here before, haven't you?" His father's lips curved faintly, though it wasn't a smile. "Hiding her? No, containing her. There's a difference. She had something dangerous, and she was making decisions she didn't understand. I did what had to be done." Her voice cut in sharp. "You locked me in a room like a prisoner. You let him think I'd run away with another man. You wanted him to hate me." His father didn't even look at her when he replied. "Hate makes a man stronger. Love makes him weak." He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "Where's the contract?" His father's gaze held his for a long, silent moment. "Safe." "Where?" he pressed. "That," his father said, Depends on whether you're ready to stop acting like a child and start thinking like the man I raised. The old games, veiled insults, cryptic riddles, a refusal to give direct answers. They came flooding back, bringing with them years of resentment. This isn't a game, he said through clenched teeth. There's a man here. I've seen him. He came out of that wardrobe. He's working for them. For the first time, his father's expression shifted. It wasn't surprise, more like calculation. If he's here, then you've already made your first mistake, coming to me without understanding the ground you're standing on. He took another step closer, lowering his voice. They will kill her, and the child she's carrying. Something flickered in his father's eyes, subtle, but there. A crack in the armor. His gaze drifted, just for a second, to her stomach. So it's yours, he said quietly. Neither of them answered, but the silence was answer enough. His father exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly. Then we have a problem, because they won't stop until they get that paper, and if they have it, they'll use it to burn down everything I've built and everything you will ever have. His jaw tightened. Then tell me where it is. His father's voice dropped to a near whisper. You're already standing in the room where it's hidden. He turned, scanning the walls, the furniture, the wardrobe. Where? That, his father said again, is something you'll have to earn. If I hand it to you, you'll never understand what it costs to protect it. Frustration flared, but before he could argue, a faint creak echoed from the hallway. Heavy steps, deliberate, getting closer. His father's head tilted slightly, listening. Then his tone changed, sharp, urgent. They're inside the house. She stepped forward. Then we need to leave now. No, his father interrupted, eyes locked on his son. If you leave, they'll catch you before you reach the gate. You want that paper? You want to keep her alive? Then follow me. Now, without waiting for a reply, he turned and strode toward the back of the room, stopping at the wardrobe. He pressed his palm flat against the inside panel, and with a sound like stone grinding against stone, a hidden door swung open, revealing a dark passage descending into the depths of the estate. His father looked back at them, his expression unreadable. Once we go down there, there's no turning back. The air inside the hidden passage was damp and cold, carrying the smell of earth and something metallic, faint but sharp. He hesitated only for a second before stepping in after his father, pulling her gently but firmly behind him. The hidden door closed with a low, grinding thud, sealing them away from the light of the room above. The staircase was narrow, carved from stone, spiraling down deeper than he expected. The walls seemed to press closer with every step, the echo of their footsteps swallowed by the darkness ahead. His father moved with a confidence that was unsettling, his hands skimming the wall as if each ridge and groove were a marker only he could read. How far does this go? He asked, his voice low. His father didn't turn. Far enough that no one can hear you scream. The words weren't meant as a threat, at least not directly, but they were enough to make her grip his arm tighter. They reached the bottom, where the passage widened into a narrow corridor lined with doors. All of them were heavy, iron-banded, and shut tight. His father stopped at the last one, pulling a small brass key from inside his jacket. This is where it's been since the night she took it, he said. I've kept it here because this house, it protects what I tell it to protect. He slid the key into the lock and turned it. The door groaned open, revealing a small, windowless chamber. In the center stood a simple wooden table, and on it, an old leather-bound portfolio. Dust lay thick on its surface, undisturbed for years. He stepped forward, reaching for it, but his father's hand shot out, stopping him. Once you take this, they will come. All of them. You'll have what they want, and that means you'll have a target on your back for the rest of your life. You understand that. He met his father's eyes, his jaw set. I understand. He took the portfolio, the leather cool and rough under his fingertips. He opened it just enough to see the folded paper inside. The original contract, complete with signatures and the damning clauses that could destroy men in an instant. That's when they heard it. The sharp clang of metal on stone, somewhere above them. Voices. Footsteps. The sound of doors being forced open. They're in the tunnels, she whispered. His father's face was suddenly hard, every muscle tight. We're not going back the way we came. Follow me. They ran down a side corridor, the air growing colder, the floor slick with moisture. The shouts behind them grew louder, closer. He could hear at least 3, maybe 4 men moving fast. The passage ended at another heavy door. His father shoved it open, revealing a small courtyard enclosed by high stone walls. Rain fell in a thin sheet, making the cobblestones shine under the gray light of dawn. "This way," his father barked, leading them to a side gate barely visible under the vines. He pulled it open, and they stepped into the cover of the forest beyond. Gunshots cracked behind them, sharp, deafening in the stillness. Bark splintered from the trees as bullets tore past. He grabbed her hand, pulling her into a sprint, his other arm shielding her as they ran. They didn't stop until the sound of pursuit faded. The forest thinned, and ahead, parked on a dirt track, was a black SUV. The driver's door was open, engine running. His father handed him the keys. "Take it," he said. "What about you?" he asked. His father's eyes met his, steady but unreadable. "I'll hold them off. You get her and that child out of here. And when you're ready to protect what's yours, you'll know where to find me." For a second, there was nothing between them but the weight of all the years and all the words unsaid. Then his father turned, disappearing back into the trees, the rain swallowing his figure. They climbed into the SUV. He started the engine, his hands tight on the wheel. She was silent beside him, one hand resting over her stomach. When they finally hit the open road, the portfolio lay across her lap. She looked at him, her eyes soft now, stripped of all the walls she had built. "We made it," she said quietly. He reached over, taking her hand in his. "We're not running anymore." And for the first time in years, the weight on his chest eased, not because the danger was gone, but because they were facing it together. Somewhere ahead, the road would split. There would be choices to make, enemies to face, truths to uncover. But as the rain began to fade and the first weak rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, they would not waste this second chance. And as they drove toward the horizon, with the morning light breaking through the clouds, he knew this wasn't just luck. They had been spared, protected from something far darker than they could see. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was the grace of God placing them exactly where they needed to be, together, alive, with a chance to start over. Because sometimes God doesn't remove the storm. He simply gives you the strength and the right person to get through it. And if you believe, like I do, that no matter how broken things seem, God can still write a better ending for your story, then stay with us here. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story that might just be the one you needed to hear today. And before you go, tell me in the comments, from which city are you watching this video right now? I love knowing where these stories are reaching, because it reminds me we're all connected, no matter how far apart we are.